I remember the exact sound of the front door. Not the creak of the hinges, though they did creak, not the click of the deadbolt sliding back. I mean the sound of the silence that followed, the kind of silence that presses itself against your chest and waits there, patient, almost polite. I had rehearsed this moment for 3 years. 3 years overseas. 3 years of sand and noise and the weight of a rifle strap cutting into my shoulder at 0300 when the desert went so cold you forgot it had ever been hot. 3 years of writing letters I wasn't sure would arrive, of reading letters I had to read twice because my eyes were too tired the first time. 3 years of counting down. And the door opened. And the house was quiet in a way that houses are only quiet when no one has been inside them for a very long time. Not the quiet of sleep, not the quiet of a Sunday morning. This was the quiet of absence, of things removed, of air that had stopped holding its breath because it had given up waiting too. I stood in the doorway with my duffel bag on my shoulder, and I looked at the living room, and something in my stomach turned over, like a stone being flipped in a riverbed. Slow, inevitable. The couch was there, the television was there. The lamp I had picked out at a yard sale in 2009 was there, shades slightly crooked, the way it had always been. But the photographs were gone. Every single one of them. My name is Margaret. Most people call me Maggie. I am 63 years old. I have short white hair and hands that have done things I am still making peace with. I have been a soldier, a wife, a mother, a stranger in my own home, and eventually, slowly, painfully, a woman who learned that the truth does not care how long you were away or how hard you worked or how faithfully you believed. It gives itself to you anyway, whether you asked for it or not. I want to tell you something I have never told anyone in the order it actually happened. Not the way I've summarized it for therapists or whispered it to myself at 3 in the morning. The whole thing, beginning to end, because I think there's something important in the telling. I think the act of putting words to it is the last part of surviving it. So, let me start before the door. Let me start at the very beginning. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania. Coal country. The kind of place where the hills are green and beautiful in June and gray and exhausted by November, and nobody seems to notice the change because they're exhausted too. My father worked the mines until his lungs decided they'd had enough. My mother worked the school cafeteria and raised 4 children with the quiet, efficient love of someone who never had enough time but refused to admit it. I was the second oldest. Stubborn, my mother said. Determined, my father said. The same thing, really, just dressed differently. I enlisted at 22. It wasn't a crisis of purpose or a lack of options. I had options. I had a scholarship to a state school, a boyfriend who was kind and ordinary in all the right ways, a future that looked like a photograph of someone else's life. Clean, predictable, fine. But fine was never quite enough for me. The Army took me, shaped me, remade me in ways I didn't fully understand until years later. I found that I was good at the work. Not just competent, genuinely good. I had a clarity under pressure that surprised even my commanding officers. I could assess a situation without my emotions flooding the room first. I could hold a line. I could wait. I met Robert during my 3rd year of service. He was a civilian contractor working logistics near our base in Germany. Tall, sandy-haired, the kind of smile that arrived slowly, like it had to travel a great distance to reach his face. But when it got there, it was worth every mile. We were married 18 months later in a small ceremony in Pennsylvania. My mother cried. My father shook Robert's hand for a very long time without saying a word. In our family, that meant everything. We had 2 children, Daniel first, then Claire. I was present for their births and absent for far too much of the rest of it. That is the arithmetic of a military life, and I am not going to pretend it doesn't cost something, because it does. It costs a great deal. You pay in missed recitals and first days of school, and the particular ache of seeing a child's face change in a photograph when you know you weren't there to see it happen in real time. But we managed it, or I believed we managed it. Robert was steady. That was the word I always used for him. Steady. He worked, he raised the children, he wrote letters and later emails and later still the occasional video call where he always looked tired but always said everything was fine. He maintained the house. He attended the school events I could not attend. He was the anchor I believed in absolutely because I had to believe in something, and he was the thing I had chosen. I had chosen him. That mattered to me more than I can say. I was deployed 4 times over 32 years of service. The last deployment was the longest. 3 years. I was 59 when I left. I would be 62 when I came home. By that point, both children were adults. Daniel was 31, working in Charlotte, married with 2 small children I had met only twice. Claire was 28, living in Seattle, finishing a graduate degree in environmental science. They both called regularly. They both seemed fine in that careful, particular way that adult children seem fine when they are trying to protect you from something. I noticed it. I filed it away. I did not examine it too closely because I was busy and because some part of me already knew, on some level below conscious thought, that there were things I was not being told. But knowing and knowing are different things. The first knowing is just weather. It moves through you and passes. The second knowing is a diagnosis. The flight home took 22 hours with a layover. I sat in the window seat and watched the Atlantic pass beneath me, and I allowed myself, for the first time in months, to think about the house. The kitchen with its yellow walls. The garden Robert had started 3 summers ago and which had, according to his last email, produced 17 tomatoes and a truly extraordinary number of cucumbers. The bedroom with the blue curtains I had chosen from a catalog, because I was overseas and could not go to the store, and so I had to trust a small photograph of fabric to represent something I would live with for years. I thought about Robert's face. Not any particular expression, just his face, the architecture of it. The way his eyes were slightly asymmetrical, the left one sitting just a fraction higher than the right. The small scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident he had told me about 3 times, and I had listened to each time as if it were new. I was so ready to be home. I was so ready to be done. I collected my bag at the carousel and walked through the arrivals hall, and there was no one waiting for me. I had not told anyone my exact arrival time. This was my habit, developed over years, because I had learned long ago that delayed flights and changed connections and the general chaos of military travel made promises about arrival times into cruelties. Better to call from the taxi. Better to simply appear. So I called from the taxi. Robert's phone went to voicemail. I left a cheerful message. I said I was almost home. I said I couldn't wait to see the garden. He did not call back. I told myself he was at the grocery store. I told myself his phone was on silent. I told myself a great many sensible, reasonable things during the 40-minute drive through familiar streets that had changed in small ways, a new stoplight here, a closed diner there, a gas station that had become a nail salon, and that felt both completely the same and subtly, indefinably different. The way everything feels after a long absence. Or so I told myself. The house was as I described. The photographs were gone. Not just relocated, gone. The hooks were still on the walls, some of them. Pale rectangles where frames had hung for years, the paint behind them slightly brighter, slightly younger looking. The ghost of documentation, the evidence of a life that had recently been undisplayed. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long moment. Then I walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator held a container of leftover pasta, a bottle of ketchup, 2 beers, and a block of cheese still in its original packaging. The counters were clean. The dish rack was empty. The calendar on the wall, one of those photo calendars, the kind you make online with family pictures, showed the wrong month. It was showing October. It was currently the first week of March. Someone had stopped turning the pages in October. I went upstairs. Our bedroom was tidy. The blue curtains hung exactly as they always had, but the nightstand on Robert's side was empty. Not cleared, empty. No book, no water glass, no reading lamp. The lamp was gone. The alarm clock was gone. The small framed picture of us at Daniel's wedding, the one that had lived on that nightstand for 6 years, was gone. His side of the closet held his suits. His shoes were lined up neatly on the floor. His shirts hung in their usual order. Nothing appeared missing from the closet. And yet, I sat on the edge of the bed and I listened to the house breathe. Houses do breathe when you've lived in them long enough. You know the sound of the furnace kicking on, the creak of a specific stair, the way the wind moves around the east corner in the winter. You know the sound of the house when everything is as it should be, and you know the sound of it when something is wrong. Something was wrong. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, which was unusual. He almost never answered on the second ring. He was a busy man with a busy life, and he loved me, but he was also, in the way of adult children everywhere, often unreachable in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. Mom, his voice was careful. That word, my name as he understood it, the word that placed me in his life, landed with a weight I felt in my chest. I'm home, I said. A pause, not a long pause. A pause you would not notice unless you were trained, as I had been trained, to notice the space between stimulus and response. To measure the silence. That's great, he said. How was the flight? Not, where's Dad? Not, I'll come over. Not, welcome home, Mom, we've been counting the days. Just, how was the flight? Long, I said. Daniel, where is your father? Another pause, slightly longer this time. He's probably just out, Daniel said. You know how he is, always running errands. His alarm clock is gone, I said. A silence. Mom. His lamp is gone, the photograph from his nightstand, all the photos from the walls downstairs. Mom, can I call you back in an hour? I'm in the middle of something. He called back in 3 hours. By that time, I had walked through every room in the house. I had opened every drawer. I had looked in the garage, in the attic, in the basement. I had sat in the garden in the fading March light and looked at the raised beds Robert had built, now overgrown, the dead stalks of last summer's plants still standing in their rows like small, exhausted soldiers. When Daniel called back, his voice had changed. It was softer now, braced. Dad moved out, he said, in October. He's been living somewhere else since then. I said nothing. Mom, I'm sorry. We wanted to tell you, but you were overseas and we didn't want to. We thought it would be better too. You thought it would be better, I repeated. We didn't want you distracted. We didn't want you to worry while you were. You thought, I said again, very quietly, that it would be better for me to come home to an empty house and find this out alone. The silence that followed was the most honest thing my son had said in the entire conversation. I did not cry that night. I have never been a person who cries easily or often, and this is not something I am proud of. It is simply a fact. The mechanism that produces tears in response to emotional pain has always been, in me, slow to activate. I feel things deeply, and I feel them for a long time, and they live in my body as weight and density rather than as water. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the house that was mine and not mine, that held the shape of a life I had been living from a distance, and I drank my tea, and I looked at the wall where photographs had once hung, and I thought about 33 years. 33 years of marriage. 33 years of believing in a person. I thought about the last time I had seen Robert in person, 14 months ago, when he had come to visit me during a rare leave period. He had seemed, what was the word, present? He had seemed present. We had eaten dinner together and walked along the waterfront near the base, and he had told me he was proud of me, which was a thing he said often, but which that evening had sounded, I now realized, like a farewell. I had not heard it that way then. I heard it now. Over the following 2 weeks, the shape of the truth arrived in fragments. Some fragments came from Daniel, who was honest with me once he understood I was not going to collapse. Some came from Claire, who called 3 days after my return and cried in a way that told me she had been holding the crying back for months. Some came from the papers I found in the filing cabinet, documents I had every right to access but had never thought to look for, because you don't look for the foundations of a house when you believe the house is standing. The truth assembled was this. Robert had met someone else. Her name was Patricia. They had been involved, according to Daniel's carefully worded account, for approximately 2 years. She was 54 years old. She worked at the hospital where Robert had started volunteering after he retired from contracting work. She was kind, Daniel said. I could hear how much he hated saying it. She was kind, and Robert had fallen in love with her. He had not told me because, and here was the piece that lodged itself in me like something caught between ribs, he had not told me because he wanted to wait until I was home. He wanted to tell me in person. He believed, apparently, that this was the respectful thing to do. And so he had waited, and the children had kept his secret, and I had come home to a house stripped of its photographs and a voicemail he had never returned. There was more. The more was this: Robert had spoken to a lawyer. There were papers. There had been papers since November. He was prepared to move through this process with, as Daniel said he had put it, as much dignity and care as possible. Dignity and care. For 33 years, and the last 3 of them spent overseas in service to a country that had asked everything of me, and to a marriage I had served with equal devotion. And what I came home to was dignity and care. Processed, managed, handled. Like a logistics problem. He came to the house on a Tuesday. I had known he would come, not because anyone told me, but because Robert was, as I said, a steady man, and steady men do not leave things unresolved indefinitely. He would come. He would sit. He would explain himself in full sentences, with eye contact, because that was who he was. He knocked. He had a key, but he knocked. I opened the door. He looked older. Not dramatically older, we were both old, in the way that 60-something is old when you look at it from the outside, but feels nothing like old from the inside. But he looked tired in a way that was different from the tired I remembered. Settled into it. At peace with it almost. Maggie, he said. Robert, I said. I let him in. We sat in the living room, and I noticed how his eyes moved to the bare walls, to the places where our photographs had been, and I understood that their absence was his doing, that he had taken them down before he left, some act of preparation or severance that I was still not entirely sure I understood. He talked for a long time. He said things that were true and things that were rehearsed and things that were both. He said he had felt alone for years. He said he had not known how to tell me. He said the distance had become something structural, not just miles, but something deeper, something that lived in the architecture of us. He said he was sorry. He said it several times, in different configurations, the way a person tries different keys in a lock. None of them opened anything in me. I listened. I have always been good at listening without visibly responding, which is a skill that serves you in a military briefing and absolutely nowhere else in human life. When he was finished, I said, "Did the children know for the whole 2 years?" He said, "They knew for about a year." I said, "Did they tell you not to tell me?" He said, "I told them not to tell you." I sat with that for a moment, the order of it, the chain of command, you might say. "So they protected you," I said, "while I was overseas, while I was serving. They kept your secret and they let me come home to this." He started to say something about intentions, about how they had been worried about my safety, about distraction in a war zone, about how they had all believed, genuinely believed, that telling me in person was the kinder choice. I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. He stopped. "I have been managing information in difficult environments for 30 years, I said. "I have received news of deaths, of serious injuries, of catastrophic situations while deployed, and I have continued to function. I have held myself together in conditions that you cannot imagine, and I have done it without anyone deciding on my behalf what I could handle." My voice was even. It surprised me how even it was. "You did not protect me," I said. "You managed me. There is a difference." He left an hour later. I stood at the window and watched his car back out of the driveway, and I felt, more than anything else, a kind of vast, open bewilderment. Not rage, not grief, not yet. Bewilderment. The disorientation of someone who has been navigating by a star that turned out to be something else entirely. A satellite, a reflection, something that moved in a pattern that resembled constancy but was not. I thought about all the things I had believed while overseas. I had believed the house was a living thing, inhabited, warm. I had believed that the silences in our emails were the silences of tired people, not the silences of people who knew something I did not. I had believed that the steadiness I had always attributed to Robert was a quality of his character, not a performance. A management strategy. I had been so far away. And the distance had been used against me, not cruelly. I don't think any of them were cruel, but efficiently. In the way that people manage difficult truths when they have decided that the difficult truth is their problem to manage. I had not been consulted. I had been, for an entire year, handled. Claire came the following weekend. She drove up from the airport in a rental car, and I watched her walk up the path, and she was so young, still, so visibly young in the way that your children always are no matter what the calendar says. She had her father's walk, that particular steadiness, and for a moment I felt a complicated love for her that contained grief inside it, the way a stone can contain water. She hugged me for a long time. She said, "I'm so sorry, Mom." I held her and felt her trembling slightly, the way people tremble when they've been carrying something heavy and are finally allowed to put it down. "I know," I said. We sat in the kitchen and she talked. She told me more than Daniel had. She told me that she had wanted to call me 100 times. She told me that she had argued with her father and her brother, that she had said it was wrong, that she had almost twice picked up the phone and told me herself. "Why didn't you?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "Because I was scared," she finally said. "I was scared of what it would do to you, over there. And then when you were coming home, I thought Dad would tell you right away. I thought he'd be at the airport. I thought..." She stopped. "I didn't know he was going to let you walk into an empty house." That detail, that specific detail, the empty house, the unreturned call. Even Claire had not anticipated that. "He meant to call," she said, very quietly. "He told me afterward that he meant to call you on the way home from the airport, and he couldn't. He didn't know what to say, and so he didn't say anything." I thought about that for a long time after she went to bed. The cowardice of silence, not malicious, not strategic, not in that moment. Just a man who had been bracing himself for a hard conversation for months and who, at the critical moment, could not bring himself to begin it. And so I had walked into the house alone. And the house had told me. I did not leave the house for several days. Not because I couldn't. I am not someone who retreats. 32 years of service taught me that retreat is a tactic, not a philosophy, and that you only retreat when retreat is the intelligent choice, not because you are afraid of the ground in front of you. I stayed because I needed to know the house again. I needed to move through its rooms in the absence of the story I had told myself about it, and learn what it actually was. I walked through every room and I looked at things without their narrative. The couch, just a couch, green, slightly worn on the right armrest. The kitchen table, just a table, 4 chairs, a scratch on the top edge where someone had dragged something heavy across it sometime in the last decade and neither of us had ever fixed it. The backyard with its overgrown garden beds and the oak tree that had been a small thing when we planted it and was now taller than the house. These were my things. This was my life, my actual physical life, the objects that had waited for me through 4 deployments and 32 years of service. They did not know what had happened. They did not care. They were simply there, solid and indifferent and real, and there was something unexpectedly comforting about that. The house had not abandoned me. The objects had not made choices. Only the people had done that. I called my sister Ruth on a Thursday evening. Ruth is 3 years older than me and has never left Pennsylvania and has opinions about everything and filters approximately none of them, and is, as a result, the person I call when I need someone to be completely, unguardedly honest. He did what? She said. He moved out in October, I said. The children knew. They kept it from me for a year. Oh, Maggie. I'm not calling to cry, Ruth. I know you're not, but oh, Maggie. I'm trying to understand it. What's to understand? He's a coward and your children were put in an impossible position, and you were overseas and couldn't do a damn thing about any of it, and now here you are. When you say it that simply, it is that simple. It doesn't feel simple. No, she said. It doesn't feel simple, it never does, but the thing itself is simple. The feelings aren't. Those are yours and they're going to be complicated and ugly and long. But the thing that happened? Simple, he left. They knew, you didn't, that's it. I sat with that. Come home, she said. Come to Pennsylvania for a week. Sleep in your old room. Eat bad food with me and watch bad television and let yourself be miserable in a warm house with someone who loves you. I went the following Monday. Pennsylvania in March is gray and cold and beautiful in the way that honest things are beautiful, without effort, without pretense. The hills don't try to look like anything other than what they are. The sky doesn't apologize for being heavy. I spent a week with Ruth and it was not glamorous and it was not dramatic. We ate soup. We watched old movies. We drove past our childhood house, which had been repainted a color we both hated, and we laughed about it in the way that is partly laughing and partly something else. She asked me once, late on the 3rd night, what I was going to do. I don't know yet, I said. I'm not going to do anything yet. You can't make good decisions when you're in the middle of something. You have to get to the edge of it first. Spoken like a true officer, she said. Spoken like a person who has made too many decisions in a hurry and paid for every single one of them. She laughed, I almost laughed. I want to tell you about something that happened while I was deployed because it matters to this story, even though it didn't seem to at the time. About 18 months before I came home, I was in a situation, I won't go into details, they're not mine alone to share, in which I had to make a decision under circumstances that were, to put it plainly, terrifying. Not physically terrifying, though there was that too, but terrifying in the way of choices that have no good options, only less bad ones. The kind of moment where everything you've been trained to do arrives at once, and you have to choose a direction and commit to it completely, because hesitation is worse than a wrong turn. I made the decision, I committed, It was the right call. But for weeks afterward, I questioned it, as you do, as you must, because the questioning is how you learn. And what I learned from that questioning was something I had known intellectually for years, but had never felt in my body. That a decision made in good faith, with the best available information, for the right reasons, remains defensible even when the outcome is imperfect. You can forgive yourself for that kind of decision. You cannot forgive yourself for the decisions you didn't make, for the conversations you avoided, for the truths you chose not to see because seeing them was inconvenient. Robert had made a choice. It was not a good choice in the way it was executed, but it was, in its origins, a human one. He had fallen in love with someone else after years of loneliness and absence, and a marriage conducted largely through screens and paper. He had not told me because he was afraid, and because he had convinced himself and the people around him that his fear was protective rather than self-serving. That distinction between a cowardly lie and a well-intentioned one does not absolve him. But it does explain him. An explanation, I have learned, is sometimes enough. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to stop being destroyed by the thing that happened to you, which is something slightly different from forgiving and more important than forgetting. I came home from Pennsylvania, and I called a lawyer. Not because I was ready for everything that a lawyer represents, the formal dismantling of a life built jointly, but because I was done being someone things happened to. I had been managed and protected and decided for, and I was 63 years old, and I had more than earned the right to be the one making the decisions. The lawyer was a woman about 10 years younger than me, calm and precise in the way of people who have heard every version of this story and found a way to remain present for all of them. She laid out my options clearly and without editorializing. I appreciated that. I have always appreciated clarity over kindness when the two are in tension. I signed papers. Not that day, but eventually. The papers that named things, that drew lines, that converted 33 years of togetherness into a set of documents and a process and a finality that I still, even now, find difficult to fully absorb. I want to tell you about the garden. Because the garden is where I worked through most of it. In April, about 6 weeks after I came home, I went out to the raised beds Robert had built and I started clearing them. The dead stalks, the old roots, the accumulated debris of a growing season that had happened while I was gone. I worked for 3 hours the first day and woke up the next morning with sore hands and a kind of emptiness in my chest that was, I slowly realized, relief. I planted garlic, then kale. Then, as the month progressed and the last frosts passed, tomatoes and zucchini and a row of sunflowers along the fence because I had always wanted sunflowers and had never gotten around to them. There is something about putting things in the ground. Something about the commitment of it, the understanding that you are planting for a future, for a season you haven't lived yet, for days you cannot see from where you stand. You plant in faith. You tend in hope. You harvest, eventually, in gratitude, whether or not everything goes the way you planned. I talked to Claire on the phone while I was weeding one evening. She was cautious with me still, the way you are with someone who has been hurt and who you partly hurt by association. I let her be cautious. I was not going to pretend the hurt wasn't there. But I also told her, that evening with the dirt on my knees and the light going golden across the fence, that I was not going to be destroyed by this. I've been through harder things than this, I said. I know, she said. Not dismissing it, I said. Not saying it doesn't matter, it matters enormously, but I survived 32 years of service. I survived things overseas that I'm not going to describe to you. I came home in one piece. I can come home from this in one piece too. She was quiet for a moment. I love you, Mom, she said. I love you too, I said. We're going to be okay, all of us. It's going to be ugly for a while, then it's going to be okay. Daniel came in May. He drove down with his wife Sarah and their 2 kids, and we had dinner in the backyard at the table I dragged out of the garage. And I watched my grandchildren run around the garden and investigate the sunflowers, and I felt something settle in me that had been unsettled since March. Daniel and I talked after the children went to bed. Sarah took them upstairs and gave us the backyard and the evening, and we sat with glasses of iced tea and the kind of silence that is earned rather than imposed. "I should have told you," he said. "Yes," I said. "I thought I was protecting you." "You were protecting him," I said, not unkindly. "And yourself, and the shape of the family. I understand why. I'm not sure I forgive it yet, but I understand it." He nodded. He looked in that moment very young. The way children sometimes look when they remember, suddenly, that they are still, in some essential way, children. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know," I said. "I know you are." We sat there a while longer. The fireflies were just starting. The oak tree was in full leaf. Somewhere in the house, I could hear my grandchildren laughing at something, that high, bright sound that is completely indifferent to everything that is wrong in the world, and it was the most beautiful thing I had heard in a very long time. Robert and I spoke once more, in June, over the phone. He called, I answered. We spoke for about an hour in that careful, measured way of people who are trying to be decent to each other inside a situation that is indecent in its core. He asked how I was. I told him the truth, that I was doing as well as could be expected, and some days better than that, and some days worse. He told me he was happy. He said it apologetically, which I found honest, actually. He was not performing happiness at me. He was reporting it, the way you report something complicated with awareness of its complications. I'm glad, I said. And I meant it, more than I expected to. Not because I didn't still carry the weight of everything that had happened. I did. I carried the year of secret keeping, the empty house, the unreturned call, the pale rectangles on the wall where photographs had been. I carried all of it, and I expect I will carry some of it always, the way you carry things that are too important to put down, that become part of your shape over time. But I also meant it. Because Robert was a person I had loved for 33 years, and he had done something wrong to me, and he was also a human being living his human life and trying to find some form of peace inside it. Those two things can exist at the same time. They do exist at the same time. The moral simplicity that says love must curdle into hatred in order for a wound to be real, I have never believed that. Wounds can be real without hatred. Grief can be genuine without bitterness. I have chosen not to be bitter. I have chosen it the way I chose to enlist, the way I chose Robert, the way I choose every morning to get up and go out to the garden and put my hands in the dirt and believe in the season that is coming. It is a choice, it requires effort, I am not always successful. But I make it. It is late autumn now. The garden has given me tomatoes. More than I expected, more than I needed, more than I could eat alone. And so I brought bags of them to Ruth and to my neighbor Carol, and to the Veterans Support Group I have started attending on Thursday evenings in the community room of the library on Maple Street. I go there on Thursdays, and I sit in a circle of people who have also come home from various things and found various things waiting or not waiting for them. Some of them are young. Some are my age. Some have stories that make my story feel small, and some have stories that feel smaller than mine, and none of that matters because the smallness and the largeness of suffering are not in competition with each other. They are just different shapes of the same human weight. I have not solved anything. I have not arrived anywhere final. I am 63 years old and my marriage is dissolving by degrees into paper and signatures, and my children are slowly, carefully, finding their way back to me, and the house is mine now in a way it was never fully mine before, not because it is better this way, but because it is clearer. The story of the house is mine to write now, and I am writing it slowly, in the only way I know how. With honesty, with patience, with the understanding that the most important things take longer than you think and ask more than you expect and give back in ways you cannot anticipate from where you stand. I served my country for 32 years. I served my marriage for 33. I came home to find that one of those services had been honored and the other had been ended quietly, without my knowledge, by someone who was afraid of my reaction. What I know, what I have earned the right to know, is this. You cannot build a life on fear of someone else's reaction. You cannot protect people by managing them. You cannot sustain love through omission. And you cannot, this above all, you cannot look at a woman who has spent 32 years in service and decide that she is not strong enough to be told the truth. I am strong enough. I have always been strong enough. I just wasn't given the chance to prove it. But here I am, proving it anyway. Late in the year, in my garden, with dirt on my hands and the oak tree going gold above me, and the whole long, difficult, honest, still continuing story of my life spread out in every direction. Here I am, still here,